put together a super force, a task force of folk that I've worked quite closely with over the last year or so, that I know are kind of diversity and inclusion champions that have really been recognised in their field for doing some really good stuff. So I've got Duncan, Fash and Amber. Duncan is the co-founder of an organisation called Deepminer. Fash, can we move onto yourself, because you're quite an interesting chap in that you wear kind of two hats, both at HomePointr and your work with the DataKirk. So Amber, on to yourself.
Yeah, I'm also a career changer. I guess I've studied everything in my life. My more immediate background, I did biology, microbiology, immunology kind of thing. And I did a career change through CodeClan into data analysis. I now work for the NHS, NSS, National Services Scotland, and also on a artificial intelligence platform. We're helping take some projects. We're at first, most of the projects have come from within NHS and Public Health Scotland, but just to provide a platform for people to deploy their machine learning models. There's been a few projects, especially inspired by the COVID-19 situation, that kind of thing. For me, diversity and inclusion, I guess, well, I'm a woman, so I think it's important. I think there's a big push to help women get into like STEM type jobs. And I guess myself, I don't like to be labeled. I'm technically an immigrant, and I guess I like to know people from all kinds of backgrounds. I also represent, I guess I'm LGBT as well. And I guess I like to know that there's like a lot of people, different backgrounds, all included in a job. And it doesn't matter. It makes life more interesting, makes the job more interesting. You get new perspectives and things like that. So I think it's really important to make sure that it's nice to hear about, especially Fash's work, like getting people who maybe don't have the access, and they can bridge that gap, in the skills to get people into data jobs, because I think it's important. It's a big thing these days, eh? So yeah.
Definitely. And I think you picked on a really interesting point there, Amber. Certainly when I started off my career in recruitment, 6 or 7 years ago, there wasn't really much talk of diversity and inclusion when you were talking to clients and you were talking to individuals who were in a hiring position. But over the last couple of years, it's been something it's really had a massive push. Organisations are trying to get a more diverse and inclusive workforce. Why do you think it's really sprung up in popularity over the last couple of years? Why do you think there's been such a push on it?
I think sometimes, even though there are some things in the world happening that are backwards, I think there has been a lot of social progression. In general, even if it's a small movement, there are always people that are recognizing. I think the internet, even though the internet has bad sides, I think it helps as well with visibility. People know that, hey, there's more people out there like me, so I can stand up and say, here I am. And you can kind of, I don't know, reach around the world and find people like you, and it becomes more visible, and there's more understanding out there because of that kind of global knowledge, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
Okay, I think for me, it's more about, I'll give a typical scenario. As a migrant in the UK, we know we're generating unbelievable amounts of data. So if I want to renew my British passport, I have to submit a passport, and the algorithm used to capture this data we always reject migrant passport. So these are part of what is bringing diversity now. Institutions that are noted to be doing programs without inclusiveness tends to create biasness in their processes, and without involving diversity in their organization, it's going to be causing more biasness, and that will cause a lot of problems within the society.
Absolutely. 100%. I think it's not only the moral thing to do, to have a more diverse and inclusive workforce, but I think it, as Duncan was saying earlier on, it adds more kind of chains of thought to an organisation. It's more creative. It allows individuals to have fresh new ideas to the company. What's your thoughts, Duncan? Because I know you touched on it briefly earlier.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of many things. I think you're seeing, on one level, when I went through my MBA and show my age here back in the day, they were talking then in 2008 about the reason why the financial crisis happened was because of groupthink, because there wasn't enough diversity in companies. I think it's a combination of maybe generational change within businesses or people running businesses. So people are more aware of differences. I agree totally with Amber and Fash. I think the exposure to more difference in the world is a lot bigger. And also I just think times are changing, the world's changing. We live, tolerance and I think the ability to understand that just because, I don't want to dig a hole here, but reality, everyone's the same, it's just, difference is good. Let's embrace it. It's a great thing to have. And everyone brings a different skill to the party. And I think whilst you see some, and then we can all point to regression in other areas, I think that's probably people who feel threatened by certain things. But yeah, I think companies are changing. There's been some very high profile cases of, even in modern tech companies like we exist in, of bias that has been built in, which has brought that to the forefront now, has really shown that. And we only need to see recently some of the issues that a large brewing company from Scotland has run into as well with regards to toxic workplaces. So again, visibility becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And even all the large tech companies, have seen issues with toxicity in workplaces and lack of tolerance, Uber, just reading an article about like Google, and things like that. They're all facing it. So it's getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the company you're referring to, they probably didn't think LinkedIn would be as much of an amplifier for exactly what's happened in the company. 10, 15 years ago, that wouldn't have been a thing. People just wouldn't have had visibility of what was happening. So absolutely. And I think you made an interesting point there, Duncan, as well, about how generations are evolving. We released a white paper a couple of weeks ago, and one of the main parts that we focused on was diversity and inclusion. And it was talking about, how people are becoming, or how the generation that necessarily I come from is, more liberal and accepting to things as they should entirely be, which is really, really interesting. Whereas, 40, 50 years ago, it would have been an entirely different subject that would be discussed, or to be honest with you, not discussed.
And it's good for the company. I think it's very good. Not everyone, not everyone should agree. You should have discussion. You should have, you may, as a leader of a company, may make a decision eventually. So the respect is all around, and you have to respect that the leader has to make a decision of a company. But I think the fact that you then sit there and listen to other viewpoints and take them on board and seriously consider them is an important thing. And I think you may not like what people are saying. You may point out some uncomfortable truths to you, but I think as a leader, you have to grow and show that you're willing to take those on, Yeah,
absolutely. We've got another wee handful of people that have joined the room. So before we go too much further into the conversation, please, anyone that's in the audience, if you've got any questions or anything that you want us to cover or to give us your own input, please do so. There's a chat box and a Q&A function at the bottom of the page, so please pop something in there and we'll certainly try our hardest to answer whatever questions you may have. Keen to make this obviously as interactive as we can. Moving on to one of the questions that I prepared earlier on that I think is quite a good talking point. How do you promote diversity and inclusion within tech, and what do you kind of do personally to promote diversity and inclusion in this area? Fash, I know obviously you've got a lot to add to that point. What's your thoughts on it?
Basically, for what we're doing is we are breaking the barrier. The first of all is there are so many disadvantaged, underrepresented community. If we don't do something about them, get them prepared, empower them, and making sure organizations tap into this talent, and that is what we're doing. So, what are the barriers? We're talking about the unfair prejudices that exist, that some people cannot tolerate certain individuals within their organization. Communication barriers as well, and interpretation of professional etiquette. these are issues that the DataKirk is working towards to ensure that businesses, enterprises understand and how to work with certain individuals and culture. Yeah.
Absolutely. What's your thoughts, Amber, on that subject? How would you promote diversity and inclusion within tech, and what do you do? Because I know you're very active as well.
I know, well, I'm still new as well to my job. Well, it's almost, it's been about 10 months now, but I'm still trying to get, especially starting the job working from home, still kind of getting the feel for the place. I guess I do notice I signed up for a bunch of groups after Code Clan that are like, the Meetup app. There are lots of things like for women in data. I think there's even like LGBT coders that meet up regularly. Or they used to meet up at Code Clan. I don't know if that's probably changed lately. I personally, in my personal life, I like to learn languages. I almost studied linguistics before I switched to science, so I still like to learn languages and reach out to people. I've kind of been to lots of different types of places and been around lots of different types of cultures and people. And I guess I always just like to reach out to people and make sure they know there's a friendly, there's a friendly face, around for anyone, I guess. I'm still trying to, like I said, because we're working from home, I still haven't gotten the full kind of spectrum of what little groups or anything are going on at my work. So I just try to watch out on LinkedIn and promote, things that they post. That's about all I can do at the moment. So just my small part. That's it.
There's a lot of organisations, because I know you and I are both kind of active members of Equate Scotland as well. And the work that they do to promote more women to enter the STEM field is really incredible, isn't it?
Yes, well, that's something I can do. I speak at things that you organize for women in data, and I hope to encourage and help people kind of make the transition into their career. So
absolutely. There's a lot of different groups out there, isn't there, that can help people regardless of what their background is. We've talked about Equate Scotland, DataKirk. Those are two tiny organisations in the overall scale of things that are really making a massive difference. Because I know you work quite closely with STA as well, Amber, didn't you?
I did, yes. Yeah, after I finished Code Clan and before I started work, so I did a little bit of involvement with them as well.
Absolutely, and it's they're all about helping kind of SMEs or small charities in Scotland that have been affected by the pandemic. Again, kind of showing that there's people from all walks of life that are taking part in that, isn't there? I remember speaking to somebody who was a retired solutions architect who was 74. That was getting back involved with STA, which I just thought was absolutely incredible. And there's individuals who, like yourself, have graduated from a Code Clan or a master's course that are bringing fresh new ideas that person wouldn't necessarily have thought possible. Duncan, from your perspective, because I think from an outsider's perspective, if they looked at Deepminer, they would say it was quite a diverse organisation. What did you do to promote that? What are you kind of doing personally for D&I?
I think from my perspective, I've always enjoyed working in a diverse work environment. And a bit like Amber, I've been lucky in saying that I've worked and lived in different places, and so being the incomer several places as well. That's not to say that that's made me different in any sense. I think, I don't know, when I got my own company, I had the chance to change things 100%. And I wanted to actively promote diversity in tech, and I had a chance, and I decided to follow that and do that. I would say at the top of that, there still has to be an ability to do the job. You got to be able to do the job. I think that's just not confuse that with being able to just do the job well. But I think we've actively worked on having a diverse team, basically, being an active thing with the company.
How have you done that, Duncan? Has there been any? The reason I'm asking this is one of the questions that's popped up is kind of concerning you know, how to get the best people for the job whilst ensuring that you are getting diverse applications. How did you go about achieving that with Deepminer?
I think there is an element of some of the technical things that we do can be trained. Okay, so there's an element of that. I'll just point out that I'm very, very dyslexic. So some of the stuff that frustrates my team is that I can't be trained to look at code. But then there's other dyslexic people who can actually do that very well. As a team, we've always looked for the attitude of people coming in. When we look at diversity, you know, I don't feel that 100% they need to have, for example, a degree. They could come from, you know, from a college. One of our team members, I think we've got 2 team members who come from Code Clan themselves, who are transferred across. Somebody's got somebody changed their career and became a data scientist. My co-founder, myself, Anya, she's CTO, she's a data scientist, she's a career changer. So we've all sort of at some point arrived at on this journey. So I don't know, have we particularly followed a policy? I don't know, Bethany. It's just more of a general cultural shift as an organization. We like to embrace difference in the company.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
I think I've had, you know, we get feedback. I've had a request recently before the pandemic that we had a slight change in our recruitment because somebody was asking us to be slightly diverse in a different way. So fine, that was took that on board and listened. So that was a direction that we needed to change there. And so there's a little bit of internal discussion as well. We discuss it as well.
Absolutely.
Internally, are we diverse or to be very honest, somebody had to say, well, we're a bit too that way. We need to go a little bit this way. I'm like, okay, fair enough. You know, that's what we need to do.
So we've got a few really interesting questions that have popped up, and Fash, I think you would be very, very well suited to give us your input on the first one. So does the panel think representation from socio-economically deprived populations is being achieved in tech? And if not, what would your approach be in improving this? What's your thoughts on that one, Fash, with the work that you've been doing?
It's a work in progress. Yeah, because when we look at the skill set for working in the tech sector, many people from my community, for example, Black community, we don't have those skills. And that is why we created DataKirk to upskill and to retrain, to reskill individuals. So as an organization, we are looking to work with an organization that might be interested in working with us so that we can close this gap, so that we can improve the representation of the Black ethnic minority in tech sector. For example, we started a program recently with Public Health Scholar, which is more about mentorship. It's because for the community too, it's more about changing. The tech is not for some people with a different brain. It's for anyone who have got the ability and and get this necessary support in order to be able to venture. So my take we need to do more of training, partnership, and collaboration. We have got a community now. If any organization interested in boosting their own diversity, they can partner with DataKirk and ensure that skills set are improved.
Absolutely, absolutely. What's your thoughts on that as well, Duncan?
Well, I was going to say, I think there's 2 things. One, that if anybody's thinking against tech, the biggest strength you can have is curiosity. Okay, if I'm going to give that to anybody, be curious, right? The best developers, the best data scientists, then technically you can learn a lot of it. Okay, now we'll come to that question separately. But curiosity, the willingness to learn, the willingness to give something a go is your biggest strength. And that's the beauty of tech. It's not about whether you've got a PhD or you've got this or whatever you've got. If you've got curiosity and a willingness to give a go at things, you can do very, very well in tech. One of our team has, literally came from banking and is an amazing coder. Did the Code Clan as an absolutely mate because she's curious. As simple as that. It's willing to give things a go. coming back to what Fash said around giving access to people, tech has technically no barrier to social economic. Technically, there is no barrier. The only barrier is being able to get hold of computers to actually do it and get access to things. I think if we can do that as an industry and enable people to get that, some of the best hackers in the world who are incredible, if you actually look at their background, some of them don't come from very, very rich backgrounds. They're just bored kids sat in their bedrooms mucking around with computers, you know? And so if we can get access to people, tech is a great enabler for social movement, because, you know, if you can code, you can pretty much do, you know, do stuff for us. You know, if you're curious and willing to learn, and you got some basics, you can have a bash at stuff. Then, you know, that really helps out. It's a great way of, you know, it's what the oil industry used to be in Aberdeen here, was a great social leveler, because you could get a ticket, go offshore, do really well. You could left school at 16. That can be the same thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Walking.
Yeah. We've got another question as well. Atop of the hiring funnel question, our applications for technical jobs tend to receive very low applications from women and from local ethnic minorities. Glad to say we do get a diverse international applications. Are there places or ways that we can advertise jobs in Scotland to help get more diverse applications through the door? So really, really good question, Daniel. And it's something that we get asked a lot from a recruitment perspective as well. Absolutely. We have an initiative at MBN called Talent 4.0, which really helps people develop themselves regardless of their background, whether they come from different communities, whether there's socioeconomic problems, whether, you know, regardless of what area of the spectrum that they come from. We encourage them to really take part in events, to connect with ourselves as a recruitment company. And, you know, it's something that a lot of organisations are asking for, to see more diversity across the board. And if you partner with organisations that are connected to different organisations that are doing really good stuff, and that understand different communities, then you should be able to get those applications. It might be more difficult to do so directly because you're kind of seeing things through one specific view. But if you take a kind of multifaceted approach to that and you are connected to good organisations, then it is possible. It is perhaps a little bit more difficult. There's organisations and there's free stuff out there as well that will kind of gender assess your positions as you put them online. You can run your job applications through a kind of platform online that will tell you how friendly it is towards male versus female words. You know, it's been proven that there are certain words that have negative connotations towards women, positive connotations towards men. And it's something that at MBN we've been taking strides and trying to improve on, because we're conscious that we want a diverse group of applicants applying. We don't just want one specific person or one specific group of people, because as we've all been saying, it makes your work very boring. You don't want to be given the workforce the exact same type of person. So yes, there are ways of doing that, but you really need to be plugged into these communities and aware of what exists out there to help you.
And actually, sorry to butt in there, Bethany, on you, and I agree with you. And therein is a problem, because when I look at it, you see the growth of people saying, write your CV this way, because now you need to get past AI applications, which are pre-sifting applications. And the very big famous one is AWS, Amazon, getting caught out with trying to diversify their workforce and discovering they built in bias into their algorithms, and they managed to exclude more minorities. But as you say there, Bethany, one of the worries, you know, and even I have it, you know, is a lot of tools are now used to pre-sift, you know, CVs. And it's all right saying, well, we're getting rid of bias in interviewers. So, you know, pale, male and white, you know, type as interviewers. And I've seen some pretty horrific sortings of stuff like that in my time, and had stand-up arguments about it. But you're replacing it potentially with a computer doing the same thing, but because it's AI, it's all okay. And I think it's a really interesting thing. Sorry, I'm just going to ask quickly, Maria put a point in there about there's lots of free resources. One other thing I do is show off your talents. There's resources where Git repositories where you can put your code, where you can put your websites and all the work you've done, show it off. First thing we do is look at what you've done, not what your paper says. We look at what you've done. That's more important to me. Sorry, just to answer that.
No, definitely. And Andy has asked, do quotas or targets help or hinder diversity and inclusion in businesses? Do you think they are a necessary evil? From my perspective, I think they help massively. Even if you get folk through the door or applications through the door that aren't 110% what you're looking for, it could even help you kind of reshape that whole job application. Things, skills, technologies, all the rest of it can be taught, but attitudes can't be. And if you get someone through the door that you think is absolutely brilliant, but doesn't necessarily have the technical skills that you're looking for, or is, 70% of the way there, that can be taught. But you can't teach their attitudes. You can't, copy and paste how motivated or the positivity that they add, or the diversity of thought that they add to your particular team. Absolutely, a lot of organisations have quotas or targets that they need to tick when it comes to doing their recruitment, and I think that they're very good. I personally think that they add more thoughts, they add a little bit more flavour to any application process, and we've seen, personally from first-hand experience, we've seen organisations that are asking for, X, Y, and Z, and we give them something that's a little bit different, and they end up changing the full job spec because they love the person that we gave them. Even if they're not 110% what they're looking for, it doesn't matter. What's your thoughts, Amber, on that?
Just kind of gathering my thoughts. Sorry, what was the original quota? We're talking about quotas, right? I'm trying to get back to this original so I don't go off track. Because I myself have not been involved in any hiring, but I do agree with even in Code Clan, the instructors there encouraged us, even if you look at a job application, if you like the sound of a job and if you meet like 40%, apply, because they said if you meet all of the criteria that they've listed there, then you're probably overqualified, or you will be soon. So don't be scared of the, like you said, XYZ, what they list as their requirements, because usually it's the person. And I always say to sell yourself. And that's what I did when I got hired in my last jobs. I told them that I made it very clear that my soft skills are really good, and that I'm a really good person. I'm a really good team player and bring everyone together. And that was more important. I was like, I can learn anything. I'm smart. I can learn skills, but you want my personality, and I pretty much without, not in those exact words. So I think it is true that it's more important to get, the people, and their skills can be taught. You can be trained things. Obviously, you need to meet a few requirements, probably depending on the job, but definitely more important than just ticking all the boxes. That's boring.
Absolutely. And Fash, I know that the DataKirk have kind of partnered up with different organisations to help the good folk that you're working with find opportunities after their training courses. Do these organisations, do they typically have quotas or targets for their D&I strategy? Do you know?
Yeah, it's just like Amber mentioned, what we've been able to gather as an organization since we started, the recruitment process could be prejudicial to some individual, but the most important thing is, as we mentioned, is learning. Can you evidence what you've been trained about? Do you have a portfolio of what you have done? And what about these soft skills? And those are what we are promoting to ensure that it's not about coding alone. It's about how you can fit into an organization, what added value you are bringing in. Yeah, because all of us have got something, and bringing that in on the table to improve your organization. And that's what an employer are looking for. And that's what we're promoting. So as an organization.
Absolutely. We've got another wee question here from Marie. Appreciate the feedback. Any suggestions on how you encourage such groups to even consider a PhD as an option if you don't need one to succeed in industry? What's your thoughts, Duncan?
There's one thing I was going to say actually in PhDs, and something we're actively considering at the moment. If you don't need one, apprenticeships. We're as a company actively, because you can now have modern apprentice, graduate apprentice, which is fantastic, because then you can learn on the job, which is even even better, which is, so we as a company, when we finally exited out of this, are actually looking at the apprenticeship routes, because then we get people who are learning as they go along and actually then deploying as they go. Because sometimes learning something in a classroom, then you hit the real world of development and deployment. And we ourselves have learned that lesson of developing stuff in a lovely laboratory, and then you come out to deploy it and you discover actually no more than one person can actually access it. Which is quite, we discovered that. That was quite a horrible moment. I think I cried. But yeah, I think, yeah, you know, PhD, every qualification has its place. You know, sometimes, you know, having a master's, having a PhD is fantastic. PhD students have a fantastic speciality and stuff, which is really, 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 really good. A master's is very, very good. An undergrad is great. But I think each person, and I think that's the key thing to realize around, if we talk about educational diversity, and I noticed something around neurodiversity as well earlier on, is everyone's journey into the tech industry is different. And I think as an organization, you need to embrace that difference. Mm-hmm. And once you can embrace that difference as an organization, you can move forward because you're then embracing all of those people into your journey. As a company, your journey through tech is different. So therefore, that's the great thing about people coming on board in tech, is that their journeys are different, so your journey is different. You may need at some point somebody with a PhD who can really do that, but actually then maybe one time you'll need a generalist. Maybe you'll need somebody who's come up from the hard school of life with a very different viewpoint to the world as you. And I think that's the brilliant thing about it, you know?
Absolutely. And quite often as well, if you talk about underrepresented groups or individuals that have faced some sort of difficulty, you know, if you're asking for somebody with a PhD, you tend to limit the applications that you can get as well. People that are often from lower socioeconomic backgrounds or X, Y, and Z, you know, they won't have, you know, a PhD as much as someone that's grown up in a more affluent area or someone that's coming from a different socioeconomic background. Mm. Whereas if you widen your kind of applications and, you know, you're more diverse and you're able to really think about what you need and break that down, you'll probably get more applications from individuals that come from all areas of the spectrum as well, as opposed to just one. And as Duncan said, yes, you know, there are certain careers out there that demand a PhD or a master's degree or whatever it is possibly going to be. But if that's not 100% essential, then it's worth widening your scope, because you'll get individuals that come from a lot more diverse backgrounds that will potentially add a lot more to your company as well. Seen a question, and Amber's just kindly put a wee response in it as well. I was going to turn to you for that one as well, Amber, because I know you've got a little girl as well. There's a lot of opportunities.
Not too little anymore. She's 17, but
right.
She still needs me.
Right? You've answered that. So can I just pop in? I know I don't mean to dominate. Do you know what? I'd love to find part-time people, right? As a company, part-time people works for us, and it would be part-time. Just make sure you deliver in the hours you work. That's all I care about. But I'd love to have some more part-time people. We've looked for part-time people. We are under the impression as an employer, sometimes people only want full-time jobs. So us trying to find people who want to work from 10 till 3, I'd love to find those. I'd really love to find people like that. Or somebody wants to work from 3 to 8, you know, that's great. We actually have part-time workers in our companies. You know, one of our data scientists is part-time.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Did you ever work in a part-time position yourself, Amber?
Not in a long time. I had a huge gap where I kind of went to university while my daughter was growing up, and I didn't work then, and I started working you know, when she was about 10, and then I've just been in full time since then. So it's been a long time since I've done part time.
Yeah, no worries. Duncan or Fash, have you ever worked in a part-time position before?
Yeah, in order to be able to sustain my family while I went for the big master program at university, I have to do a job share. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think what Duncan have just mentioned is a very fantastic initiative, because you don't find it many, because many people are afraid of the sensitivity of the data, They want people to work full-time, committed to one job. But if more organizations are doing it to create more inclusiveness, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you find it when you were doing that? Did you find that the company often wanted you to work a little bit longer, or did you find there was a balance there?
Actually, my company want me to do more full-time. So, but I have to convince them that this is so important for me. Otherwise, I have to take a career break. So yeah, but it's more about like how your organization value you, how you're able to tell the story, convince them, and most companies will be willing if you are performing and be productive. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a lot of it's agreeing what the outputs are and making sure that everybody agrees there's a reasonable outputs and then doing them. You know, there's a two-way thing. I've worked in a part-time job a long time ago, Bethany. I was a lifeguard. So that was the last time I was in a part-time job. No, I tell a lie. I career braked and I went to work for a great organisation called the Data Lab, and Gillian there, when I negotiated joining them as their business development person for the Northeast, very foresightedly allowed me to work 4 days a week. I'm totally lying, and so that was technically a part-time role. Very grateful. For me, it meant I got to spend every single Friday with my son, so which was absolutely amazing. When the few times I had to work a few hours extra, I was grateful. It was fine. I did it. I'd much rather have the Friday. As a company, we've recently, some of our team only work 4 days a week anyway, and we have that, so we value that, and we tend to find people are motivated. I was certainly motivated. I probably went the extra mile just because I had that Friday off. I got to meet around with my son. You know, it was great.
Definitely.
Might be less money, but who cares?
Yeah, no, there's more important things as well. You need to prioritise different aspects
I'm
of
not
your life.
taking it with me, am I? You know.
Yeah, definitely. And at Fash, I think you kind of touched on this earlier on, but what do you think are the kind of main barriers to diversity? Have you experienced any yourself through your work with the DataKirk or personally?
It's part of life. So there are three main challenges that over the last few years have common to people within our community. Number one is unfair prejudice. You know, yeah, individuals cannot tolerate other individuals. That needs to change. Communication barrier, you know, tone of voice from certain group. Some people don't appreciate it, but that is culture. You know, once HR are able to create a culture within an organization, and that can be, you know, taken care of. Then interpretation of what we call a professional etiquette, you know, because certain people have to dress, certain people have to behave, that needs to be, you know, removed. And those are the challenges we are trying to work with organizations so that people, individuals can, you know, work at peace with one another. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And where do you think that, to touch on your kind of first point as well, Fash, there, when it comes to, you know, there's some people out there that just, you know, they're ignorant and they won't accept things or whatever. How do we go about changing that mindset?
It's really difficult. I'll give you a scenario. It started a long time ago, and I will not mention the name of this organization. That if you apply, in those days we have to submit an application by post. So you request an application, the application will be sent to you 2 days before the closing time because of your name. So I got caught up in that. Then I raised the conversation within our group that time. Then we sent massive requests for application, and the same thing happened. It happened. So, but that organization have changed now. But it just because we were able to take sample from the population and presented the argument. So,
right, okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's the right thing as well. What Fash is saying, there is an element of leadership, of challenging the norm. You know, many years ago, I was in the opposite side of somebody going through a load of CVs, and this was in a country where you had to put photographs with your CV. And they're literally going through no, 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 and based on the photograph and the name.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember standing there and saying to this then CEO, so what the heck are you doing? I didn't quite say it that way. And this was all in another language. And we had a stand-up argument, and we were arguing about diversity. And, you know, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I've sort of said, I find that really morally offensive that you're doing that.
Yeah.
You know, it's just wrong. It's just, I don't care if they're rubbish, but it's just wrong that you're looking at a picture in their name and billing their CV, you know.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Terrible. I've been in that exact same situation as well. When I lived over in France as well, and again, it's compulsory in many positions and many job vacancies in France to put your photo on it, and the amount of wrongdoings that I've seen simply because someone didn't like the look of somebody.
Yeah.
It's been absolutely appalling, and I was probably in a copy and paste situation to yourself, Duncan, when I was ranting and raving like the mad Glaswegian woman that I am, saying this should not be happening. What are you doing?
Yeah.
It's just terrible, which is why I always say to folk, do not put a photo of yourself on a CV, even if there's some level of conscious or unconscious bias there. It gives people a reason to say yes or no. I review hundreds of CVs every month. With the Data Lab placement program that I run, or that I ran this year, I was speaking to a lovely student. She had a gorgeous photo of herself on the CV, and my first thing was, you need to remove that. And she replied with, oh, is it not a good photo? And I was like, it doesn't matter whether it's a good photo or not, it's how people will interpret that. You need to remove that because it gives someone a reason to say yes or to say no, and if they say yes, it's probably for the wrong reasons. So you need to remove that. Absolutely. That's interesting. That's happened as well. Yeah. What do you think, Amber? What do you think any barriers have been? If you've got any experience with that?
I don't have any. I've had weird experiences in jobs, but I couldn't tell you why that was. You know, if it was because I was from the States or was it because I was a girl. You know, I've had things happen to me in workplaces. I don't know, like, you know what I mean? It's hard to know. I've had, let's just say, and that was in the States actually when I was quite young, and it wasn't even for hiring purposes, but bosses being inappropriate. And I've had hear people bully me at it for no reason, and I could never figure out why. You know, it was like they were definitely treating me different than everyone else in the team, and I couldn't figure it out. It took a long time to even figure out I was being bullied. I thought something was wrong with me, and then I realized that other people noticed it as well. And I don't know. It's hard. I haven't thankfully haven't had anything recent, you know.
Did you do anything to rectify that situation?
I did. I tried. It was kind of scary. It was like my first science job, and it was just a very odd situation. So I reported it to, they gave us a chance to talk to supervisors like on a sister team. So we crisscrossed, and I told the other supervisor all about it. And then my exit interview I did as well. But I was kind of worried about backlash or it affecting future jobs. So I tried to just keep it neutral until I left. Yeah. It's scary. It's scary when it happens, you know, and you don't know.
That's a really interesting point there, Amber, you've made as well, is the concept of backlash and worried about future jobs. You know, you only need to see some of the things that I said recently with that story on LinkedIn about other companies. You know, that there are people who worry about saying stuff because of backlash, you know, because, you know, you're worried about whether you get a good CV. And likewise, there are companies who don't say things because they don't want to get a backlash, you know. And I think you've got to be a bit, you know, there's a fine line these days between how you tread this stuff. You know, it's quite, you know, I think it's a funny environment. You know, you need to be open-minded as much as you can be, especially as a hiring organisation. Yeah,
absolutely. You do need to be as open-minded, absolutely. And you also need to aim to create a secure environment for folk. Make sure that you've got protocols and policies in place so that if the unpleasant situation like Amber was describing, if that does arise, you can look from it from an entirely impartial point of view, and you can do what's best for your employee. There's organisations, I've worked in toxic men's clubs before in the past, where it's just not been a pleasant environment. And because of there's not been necessarily a support system there, it's not been, certainly from my perspective, you didn't feel like you were able to raise a complaint, which is a totally ridiculous thing to say. But, you need to do that from my perspective if you want people that are coming into the organisation to have a better experience than what you had. And there are organisations out there that can protect you and can ring fence your rights and make sure that you are fully aware of everything that's going on. I know, Duncan, certainly, the Citizens Advice Bureau, I know that you've just taken on a wee piece of work with them. They're a fab organisation to interact with and find out exactly what's going on and what your rights are in whatever situation, so that if you do feel that you're being discriminated against or treated unfairly, they can give you free and totally impartial advice with the best way to deal with a situation. There's been a few more questions that have came in, which is great. One was centred around neurodiversity. So Ian's talking about, I think, interviews and related recruitment processes discriminate against diversity, such as neurodiverse individuals. How can we make recruitment better? Brilliant question, Ian, absolutely brilliant. I think, certainly from my perspective, you need to understand that everyone is different, and you need to be able to modify whatever procedures to make someone feel as comfortable as they possibly can within an interview or an office situation. We've had instances in the past where individuals have came in and asked for things to be slightly modified, and it's fine, it doesn't matter. And if small changes can make someone feel better, then organisations will absolutely try to do that. There's brilliant organisations, I know, Duncan and Fash, you might interact with Auticon, that are an absolutely brilliant organisation that help people that have autism. They help them find work, they're a consultancy. And there are support mechanisms out there so that individuals are aware of how they can ask this question, how they can present this to potential employers and really see it as a benefit rather than a burden, because it's not a burden. What's your thoughts, Fash, on this?
Yeah, I would say you mentioned policy, culture. Culture is what shapes all of us.
Yeah.
And organizations need to have that cultural change in order to improve engagement, to improve their recruitment processes. Mm-hmm. So, and that is what needs to be done now.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you had experience with that in the past, Duncan, as well?
Neurodiversity of recruitment, yes. I think as an I think some of it comes down to, I think it's been mentioned a bit earlier, is how you recruit. If you have a list of must-haves and must-haven'ts, you know what I mean, and you're recruiting, every organisation, this is the perfect person that they look for, and the group think, I think that's where you tend to box yourself into a room where you've got nowhere to go, yeah. And you miss out on potentially neurodiverse people who could bring a huge amount to the operation. And if you change your focus to, certain roles, I understand. I could not be calculating astrophysics stuff because I'm not an astrophysicist. Okay, let's be completely honest about stuff like that. You would not ask me to design a self-driving car algorithm because I don't have that skill set to do that. So that's absolutely fair enough. Let's be straight up. But I think the recruitment policy needs to be open enough, as Fash said, to be open, to accept that people are different, and not to be too prescriptive, to just to look at the wider thing. Have I seen it in the past in recruitment practices? Probably. Have I noticed it? I'm not sure. Uh-huh. I've certainly been in organisations where there's been elements of groupthink. I've certainly, though, worked for very progressive organisations many moons ago who are very open to differences. And I've certainly worked for an oil and gas organisation who very early on, in a very male-dominated world, broke the rules and appointed a female operations manager, and very, very progressive about that. you know, so all different types of organizations.
Definitely. No, that's fab. That's fab. And Ian's raised another really good point, saying that diversity can also mean individuals that don't necessarily have a conventional career.
Yes.
Maybe they've got gaps in their working life and have lots of jobs here and there in their CV, but don't necessarily have experience in the industry. If they're making a career change into tech, for example, we should make sure that recruitment doesn't discriminate against this. Brilliant point, Ian. And you know, there's so many. I held a talk a couple of months ago talking about how to get started in data science or how to get started in your kind of data career. And we had two speakers. Delphine was one of them, Amber, and we also had Barry Smart, who's an AI engineer, and Delphine's a data scientist. And they both came from quite different backgrounds. You know, they were working one was working as a scientist, one was working as a technologist. They hadn't really experimented with data science beforehand, and they went, retrained, done something entirely different, and they went to organisations that appreciated the value of what they could add. As we were saying earlier on, a lot of technologies can be, you know, improved over time. They can be learned. You know, organisations don't necessarily expect you to be an expert in X, Y, and Z in the day that you start. But as long as you've got the right attitude and you've got perhaps the softer skills that they're really, really looking for, you know, the team leadership, the ability to communicate, deal with stakeholders, whatever they need, then that really impresses organisations as well. In terms of making sure that recruitment doesn't discriminate against this, there has been, certainly from my perspective, working in recruitment for the last 7 years, there's been a lot of progress towards this when organisations are really appreciating the value that different skill sets can bring to your company, especially just now when there is a massive data skill shortage for data scientists, data engineers, analytical professionals. If you can really highlight the value of your previous career and show how this is applicable to your future career, then it does make a big difference. Fash, I know that you came from a completely different background and you've got your kind of data governance position at the moment after retraining. How did you find kind of moving into the job market after your master's and doing something a bit different?
I would say I've been privileged and worked my life hard because what I did was to say, okay, in order for me to do this, what do I need to do? Mm-hmm. So I look at the tech stack, then started that journey, then started applying for those. And I'm lucky, before I completed the degree, I've got a job already. So, and the opportunities are there now. Lots of organizations that are struggling. So I will encourage anyone that wants to make a career change. This is the time.
Absolutely.
This is the time.
And Amber, you have a similar experience as well, don't you?
Yeah, I have a very different background. I guess now my big gap is at least 5 years back. So it doesn't show now, it won't show in my current CV, but I have seen jobs. I've known people to apply for jobs and they demand like a lot of evidence for any gaps. Like I knew someone who, they took 3 months off between jobs because they'd been contracting. They went on a big trip and they're like, we want receipts, we want your flight receipts, we want hotel receipts. I would just refuse to apply to a place like that. I'm like, I don't even want to work there if that's their attitude, because I think things are getting better now. People are starting to realize people don't live to work. Like we also have lives and we want to travel and see other places and do other things, take care of kids or family or whatever we need to do. And I don't like that demanding. If I show up to work and do my work, you know, no one stays at companies for 20 years, 30 years anymore. Everyone's moving around. So I don't like that attitude. So honestly, I apply to places that don't even ask, or you know, that they don't seem to, they see people as real people, you know, and not robots. So that's me.
And I think there's an element of just being curious. Well, you know, why did you take 2 months off? Well, I went on a big trip to do that. Okay, cool.
That's different. That's okay. Awesome. Yeah.
Cool. You did that. That's really interesting. My first question, well, where did he go? You know.
Yeah, that's cool. But I know people that they wanted evidence of every minute. I'm like, would you like and this is not me, but I told my friend, I was like, would they also like a urinalysis? And you know, what else? Blood samples?
That's a really weird thing to say though, because one of your answers could just be, well, you took 6 months off. Why? Why did you do that? Because I could. You know, because I could. I had enough money in the bank and I fancied doing nothing for 6 months because I'd worked really hard And so I just decided to take 6 months off because I fancied taking 6 months off.
Yeah.
I mean, where'd you go with that? I'd sit there and say, okay, well, I got that. That's fair enough. You know, because the answer could be because I could. You know, a friend of mine, I said, you know, what are you going to do? You got made redundant. I said, what are you going to do? He said, nothing. He said, I quite fancy having a bit of a break from work. And because their payoff from redundancy was good enough that they basically could have a break from work. And that's what they wanted to do. And I was like, you lucky person.
Absolutely. And that's becoming more and more popular as well, where people are having a bit of downtime, whether it's between contracts or between different positions. So it's a brilliant point that Ian raised about how diversity also means individuals that don't come from, you know, they didn't start at A and end up at B. They've done something a little bit different. So,
and I think also, you know, we've just come through a pandemic. Okay, that I've never worked through a pandemic. I've never led a company through a pandemic. I've done financial crises. I've done two. I've raised finance in the middle of one financial crisis. I've never done a pandemic. The impact on society and mental health is incredible. You know, I'm not afraid to say that I've struggled through this. You know, there's been times when I've sat there and I've just thought, what the hell is going on? You know, you're staring down the barrel of a gun. You've got a company, you're trying to pay people's salaries, and you're thinking, what the heck is going on here? Because, you know, your mortgage payments are still coming out each month. You know, tell you what, the mortgage people didn't let up on you in that time off, you know. So, you know, everybody was impacted. You know, our team have struggled, you know, and I won't say, they probably wouldn't like me saying that, but, you know, nobody has come out of this unscathed, and it's been hard bloody work. And I think for companies to sit there and to say, you know, and expect you to say, oh, it's all tickety-boo and it's all wonderful, and I powered through and I learned 5 new languages and I learned how to, you know, I can now knit and I can do all that. You know what, some people just suffered, you know. It's this year's been a tough world. One of the good things that's been good, I think it's made a lot of companies realize that the old way of working are no longer valid. I think for us, even though I say beforehand we were routinely remote and diverse, I think we've come to realize we really can do it even more. Our productivity went up going fully diverse, and some of the things we've had to deal with have been hard work, but I think made us realize that we can deal with them, you know.
Absolutely. And that touches quite nicely onto the last point I wanted to cover, which was about, you know, I think we've all recognised that diversity and inclusiveness, you know, there's never going to be a perfect Oxford dictionary definition of them. It can cover so many different things. How do you think the COVID-19 pandemic has affected, you know, positively or negatively, diversity within organisations? Do you think it's allowed more folk to apply for opportunities because organisations are now working from home? That's certainly the interpretation that I've got over the last few months, and that, you know, there's not necessarily a location restriction on positions now. You can work anywhere in the world, and that allows you to access a much more diverse talent pool, which is only going to be beneficial for you. What do you think, Amber? What's your thoughts on that, having kind of changed jobs during the middle of the pandemic yourself?
It's an ideal situation for me. I'm one of those people, I think, especially with the kid who's now almost, you know, too old to need me to be home all the time. But that feeling of that it was so stressful, like waking up in the morning, like dropping her off at school, going to work, and like trying to get back in time to get her from, you know, after school care, and just that horrible feeling of not being there when you're needed. Sometimes there's like an emergency and you have an accident prone child, she can't hear me. And you need to get somewhere because she's like, yeah, broken her arm, or, you know, that stress. And it's just been, I know I'm lucky during the pandemic that I wasn't in a stressful home situation. I know some people are, and that's but I was lucky that I got to be home, you know, with my daughter, because I had got a job working from home, and that takes off so much stress. That for me, the commuting, even if it's close, it's not that far, it just makes everything more stressful. If you can start earlier at home and you're there, you know, if you're needed, it's just, you can, you know, take a nap at lunch instead of eating, something like that. If you need to, you do what your body needs. And I think I've gone off on a tangent and I forgot what I was really trying to say. But for diversity and inclusion, I think it's good as well, because you're right, people can work from all over, and it's more about, you know, can someone do the job? Are they fit for the job? And does it matter? Yeah,
absolutely. And I know Duncan and Fash, you've both hired individuals over the course of the pandemic as well. What's your kind of thoughts on the pandemic and diversity and inclusion?
Okay, I'll go. Do I go first? Okay, thank you, Duncan.
Please do.
Okay. On a personal note, I think it's a mixed feeling because the pandemic actually affected our community negatively in terms of COVID-19. But in terms of my own personal life, I'm made for community. But that inability to socialize, to interact, to do what I love to do, I really miss it. Parenting perspective is really good, made me to be more closer to the family, be more good parenting, but at the same time, too much. Too much. On a project perspective, I think it's a wake-up call for us, which is a blessing that we need to start developing different skills that can make us the more improve our earnings, and also to be more relevant, to be more inclusive in getting to the jobs that really matter now, not what I love doing, because automation is changing and some disciplines are disappearing, and therefore we need to continuously to learn now. So what's happening in the next 10 years, nobody knows. So it's been a blessing.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a really good point there. I think both Fash and Amber made. I think this comes down to the concept of diversity and inclusion. For some people, it was great. For some people, it was horrific. If you're 26 sharing a 3-bedroom flat with your colleagues, living and working in your bedroom, it was probably pretty horrific. I know that age it would have been, I'd have hated it. And some people are just more social. I struggled myself like that. I like out and about, Bethany, I liked coming down and, rocking up and hello to people, you guys. Sometimes when I do some of my best work is when I'm speaking with people. I think what it's meant is that opening up diversity and inclusion, it's meant that companies have realized they can be more flexible. They can now accept that people will want to work from home more because they have children, or want to work in a particular way, or their hours may be some people more nighttime. I think as long as you can, so talking from a company owner as well, as long as I can guarantee certain core things will still occur, because there's certain times, that you need the team to be all around, because not everyone can have a meeting at 7 o'clock at night, But I think, as long as you set some core boundaries, I think the beauty of this pandemic has meant that you are more open these days, coming back to diversity and inclusion. I think that does mean, do you know what? Wasn't that bad, actually. It's quite cool. And some people want to go back to it. I don't blame them. Because when I look at my 2 darlings, there's times when I want to go back to the office desperate.
Definitely, absolutely. No, certainly from my perspective, I've ran the data lab placement program for the last couple of years, and there's been certain organisations that said to me point blank, we need bums in seats 5 days a week, 9 until 5. And that's fine if they need that. It's not necessarily going to be the most friendly or diverse recruitment process, but if that's what they need, fair play to them. You can try and change and win hearts and minds, but you're not always going to be successful in that. But over the last year, I've seen a lot of organisations who had that mindset now say to me, Bethany, that's fine. If they want to work at home, then that's absolutely perfect. There's a few offices in Glasgow, and I'm sure in Edinburgh as well, with the kind of old Victorian buildings that weren't necessarily handicapped enabled. And they now have individuals that are handicapped that are working for them at home. And, they've got access to fresh new talent that they would not have had the opportunity to do so before, had it not been due to the pandemic. So absolutely, it's something that we would never wish to happen again. It's been a horrendous experience over the last 18 months. But I also think there's been some positives that have came out of the end of it as well when it comes to D&I initiatives, which has been quite good to see something positive happen.
I agree, Bethany. I think that's been a huge initiative. I think that some companies have really woken up to that fact, and people with reduced mobility, You know, it's a completely reasonable adjustment to let them work from home. And it's been proven to companies that they can do that now, you know, and I think that's a very important thing that's occurred.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think unless there's any more questions, I think that's us going to call it a wrap just now. Any closing comments, Duncan, Fash, Amber? Anything you want to add before we end up?
I don't think so. I just liked that last question. I lost my train of thought and then they finished it. They were thinking the same things and they said the things I forgot to say, so that was cool.
Good. No, definitely. Well, it's been a very, very interesting discussion. So thank you very much, Amber, Duncan, and Fash. This is going to get published on YouTube over the next week or so. And I'm sure Amber, Duncan, and Fash wouldn't mind you popping them a wee LinkedIn message or connecting with them as well, just to pick their brains a wee bit more. But no, thank you very much to all the attendees that have taken part, and thanks for the great panel as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was good.
Thank you. Thanks.